Hey everybody, Icy Cat. The September patch notes have just been released and the mid-season reinforcements are coming in to change the way the game is played. We're going to go over all the details and break it down. The September patch update 4.2 will be going live tomorrow, Tuesday, September 13th. This patch begins the announcement of a new program called Mid-Season Reinforcements. These are changes that will come in the middle of a season, so you don't have to wait a full 3 months for major updates. Of course, we've always had monthly updates, and they've done a lot to address content, and every once in a while we get some operator buffs. But this one is completely different than other mid-month updates. We've never seen this volume of changes and impact on the meta in an in-between season patch. Let's start with the operator buffs, and first up is Twitch. She's an example of somebody that's been needing a change for a long time. Her guns are great, her mobility is good, but her drone has been seriously lacking. That thing gets taken out in one shot, no problem. It's very obvious, it has limited range and limited ability, and once it's shot, that's it, she has no ability anymore. They said that while she had good pick and win ratios, her gadget was really underwhelming. Now last week, Rainbow Six put out on their official social media accounts an example clip of some changes that were coming to the Twitch's shock drone. I covered that in a video last week talking about that as well as speculating on where that was leading, and now we have final confirmation. So we will be deploying a fully functional shock drone during the preparation phase in place of a normal drone. So now while the defenders are placing their gadgets, Twitch will have the ability to take them out. However, doing so will draw attention to her drone. You'll be able to see the visible taser dart trails, and that'll make it more likely for her to get shot. But if you use it smartly, you'll be able to do damage to the defensive team before the round even starts. Once the match begins, Twitch's 2 normal drones have now been replaced by a second shock drone. So deploying the second shock drone is not going to destroy the first one if it survived the prep phase. This means that Twitch will be able to switch between the prep phase shock drone and the deployed shock drone by cycling through her observation tools and then activating it. So she can literally have 2 shock drones out simultaneously, controlled independently of one another, and move them into different positions. You can use one for intel and one for taking out gadgets, 2 for intel, just any combination that you want there. In addition to those changes, the shock drone itself has been modified in the following ways. It now moves 30% faster. This puts it on par with normal drone speed. Additionally, it will also create less sound when moving. The red light on the model has been removed. It was felt that the model itself was significantly bigger than a regular drone, and that made it visible enough. The light would just draw further attention to it. Finally, the range of the darts have been increased from 5 meters to 7 meters. This will allow you to take out targets at a longer distance, making it less likely for you to get signal jammed. And you can reach those high-up cameras that might have been a little harder to hit unless you were right underneath them before. The next change comes for Blackbeard, and this isn't a buff, this is actually a much-requested nerf. Gameplay-wise, they observed that the usage of his mounted shield was too passive. Players would put it on, and it would stay on the entire round. There was really no incentive to ever take it off. Sure, you'd move more slowly with it on, but most players didn't care. They'd take that in exchange for the almost godlike invulnerability you would sometimes get with him. The following changes are meant to address these points. Blackbeard now has 2 shields and can cycle through them with a Q system by equipping and unequipping. The hit point of the shields has been reduced. Previously, the hit point of the shield was 800. Now they're changing that down to 150. That's a significant reduction. A couple of shotgun blasts at close range or several bullets from your automatic should be enough to take this out relatively quickly. The shield's durability is going to be displayed on the UI. So while the shield itself can be broken far more easily than ever before, he'll also have a second one in reserve to put on when that does happen. This will also create situations where you may not want to put his shield on until you need it, rather than just simply keeping it on at all times. We also have a third operator change, and this one is also a buff coming to Doc. Likewise, this leaked from Ubisoft Brazil last week, and I did cover that in my video for incoming operator buffs, but now we have the details. It was felt that Doc's stim pistol was too situational. They wanted to give Doc a gadget that made it more useful in more varied contexts. So what they've done is given his darts the ability to heal teammates. This means he can have a much more versatile role in strategic situations. Doc can continue to revive himself the way he's always done with the DBNO, or he can heal himself. Additionally, he can revive other operators or heal other operators. Now that we were able to kind of guess by what we saw last week, but here's some information we didn't know. He can now overheal. Shooting a dart at a fully healed teammate or himself will provide a boost of a max of up to 120 total health points for a limited time. The heal itself is 40 hit points per dart, so even partially injured teammates can be overhealed. This overheal is only temporary and will decrease 1 health point every 2 seconds until you get back down to 100 health points. So an example on this might be if your operator has 80 health and Doc shoots you with a dart. You will get 20 back, restoring you to the 100 hit points, and then the other 20 beyond that will take you up to 120. You will be at a temporary hit point status, and that will drop by 1 hit point every 2 seconds until you come back down to 100. Moving past the changes of the operators themselves, we also get into some new gadgets. Last week I previewed audio files indicating claymores were going to be used in the game, and now we have confirmation. These will actually go to the attackers. A lot of people were thinking they would come to defense. They are not. The attackers will have Claymore Mines. This is a deployable gadget used to cover their backs while progressing forward, flanking, or when in a vulnerable position like sniping or droning. You plant the claymore, and once a defender crosses on one of its 3 laser rays, it will explode in a front-facing directional pattern. So this is going to be a device that you can plant somewhere on a flat surface. A defender will cross it, it'll detonate. This will function very similar to a Kapkan trap. Although it says it has 3 lasers instead of 1, this is probably going to make it far more visible. So I don't know how common kills with this will be. But if you're, for instance, walking around as Pulse looking at your scanner, it's going to be very easy to step on this thing if you're not paying attention. Now the way this works is the claymore distribution has been given to attackers who mostly play support roles, or those who could benefit from having a way to watch their back. Thatcher loses stun grenades and gains a claymore. Twitch loses stun grenades and gains a claymore. Glaz loses breaching charges and gains a claymore. Thermite loses stun grenades and breaching charges and gains instead smoke grenades and a claymore. That is, of course, an either-or option. They did specify that since Thermite is probably the most support-oriented attacker right now, at least in the analysis that they've seen from seeing how people play, that they believe smoke grenades will fit better with his playstyle than stun grenades. I suppose they're looking at overall statistics. I personally don't use Thermite in a support role. I do use him as a little bit more of an aggressive role, and many other people might do that as well, but they're looking at their overall play statistics, not individually. So while the defenders didn't get the claymores, they get a new gadget to play with as well on their side, and that's the impact grenade. Select defenders now have access to the impact grenade. This is a grenade that explodes on impact or after 1 second of throwing it. This can also be used to open holes in the environment. Impact grenades sound like they'll be effective against operators, but we don't know how effective they will be against shields. A lot of people feel that right now shield operators have become almost useless because every defender has a nitro cell, it seems like, and now if we have these grenades in the mix, that raises the question of how effective are they against shields, but we don't know the answer to that. What is exciting though is that it can be used to open holes in the environment. The defenders needed another tool to be able to modify the map according to their needs. While the nitro cell could do that, most people didn't want to give it up in case they ran into a shield and they only had one of them. Convincing somebody to give up their nitro cell to modify the environment instead of being able to use it offensively was something that was going to be kind of tricky to get people to do. They've distributed impact grenades with 2 things in mind: reducing the overall amount of nitro cells among defenders and adding more active options to defenders who mostly use their unique ability during the preparation phase. Quevera loses her nitro cell and gains impact grenades. Castle loses barbed wire and gains impact grenades. Smoke loses nitro and gains impact grenades. And Rook loses barbed wire and gains impact grenades. Next up, we have the new categories of attachments. New to the game will be the muzzle brake attachment. This diminishes first shot recoil, putting an emphasis on precision. This can be applied to the following weapons: the G36C and the R4C, the MP7, the SR25, the MK17, the C8, the Kamers, the UMP45, the MP5, both the full-size version and the MP5K, the P90, the AK-12, the OTS-03 sniper rifle, the 5.52 Commando, the 416C, the 9x19 VSN, the FMG-9, AR-33, L85A2, 5.56XI, the F2 FAMAS, the 417, and finally the MPX. All of these can be equipped with the muzzle brake attachment. Once again, this diminishes first shot recoil, putting an emphasis on precision. The second new attachment we'll be seeing added to the game is the heavy barrel. With this barrel attachment equipped, damage at long distance does not decrease as much in trade-off for extra recoil. This means that there is less fall-off damage, which will vary per weapon, but will be around 10 to 20% damage increase at long ranges. So you preserve more of your damage over distance in exchange for a little bit of extra kick on the recoil. Weapons that this can be applied to are the 416C, the Beretta M12, the C8, the Mac 11, the SMG 11, the P90, the Para 308, the R4C, the 9mm C1, the UMP 45, and the SCAR MK17. Curiously, we're not seeing the long-range weapons included on this list. If you have a weapon that's intended to do more precision shots at a longer range, then preserving that damage fall off at that longer range would be pretty important. I'm very surprised to see Glaz's sniper rifle, as well as the prominent DMRs in the game, are not present in this list for heavy barrel upgrades. Meanwhile, some choices like the SMG-11 and the P90 are. We're also getting tweaks to operator gadgets and loadouts. Valkyrie's deployable cameras are now being reduced from 4 to 3. It was felt that the combination of her strong weapons and her strong ability made her too much of a must pick. They think that this will bring her overall into a little bit more balance. IQ and Montaigne will now be able to deploy and unequip their gadgets faster. Pre-patch, it was 1.5 seconds to deploy and unequip. After this patch, it will be 1 second to deploy and unequip. They're going to be allowed to fire their weapon at 0.7 seconds through that animation. So when the animation is almost complete, you'll be able to fire. The change of a half a second for deploying the ability or unequipping it doesn't sound like much, but it should translate into the difference between some gunfight losses and wins. We also have a ton of weapon balancing coming up. First up is Twitch's 417. The main problem with this gun's recoil was the string shots one after the other while staying on target. They wanted to make it so that there was less increasing recoil when you're chaining shots. The recoil change only affects one parameter. It will reach its maximum recoil slower than before by 19% on a keyboard and mouse or 15% on a gamepad. For those of you that don't know, there are slightly different recoil modifiers applied to one input device versus the other. They've also increased the 417's damage to bring it on par with the other two DMRs. So before the patch, it did 65 damage from 0 to 28 meters. After the patch, it's going to do 70 damage in that same range. The next gun to be changed is Buck's Claymores. It was felt that overall the damage on this gun was just way too weak. Before the patch, the damage was 57 from 0 to 28 meters. Now the damage is going to be up to 72 from 0 to 28 meters. The next weapon change comes to Fuse's 6P41 LMG. It's getting a damage upgrade to its close and long-range encounters. Before the patch, it did 45 damage from 0 to 15 meters, 32 from 15 to 38 meters. Now it's doing 52 damage from 0 to 8 meters, and 45 damage from 8 meters to 15 meters, and then 36 damage from 15 to 38 meters. Next up is Ash's G36C. They felt that there wasn't enough to differentiate the R4C from the G36C. They've now modified the G36's recoil, so it's much more appealing compared to the R4C. It still deals less damage, but it should now give you a more interesting choice between the two. The recoil changes are done in 3 different ways. The gun will rise at a slower rate. They're decreasing the rate by 25% on keyboard and mouse and 13% on gamepad. They're lowering the maximum recoil limit. In other words, the recoil will not be as important upon reaching its maximum, 12% on keyboard and mouse and 6% on gamepad. Additionally, the first shot multiplier has been lowered. That means that the first shot when shooting in any fire mode will make the gun jump less, 15% on keyboard and mouse and 12.5% on gamepad. The next change comes to Rook and Doc's P90. Overall, it felt like the MP5 was a better choice for Rook and Doc in most situations, and they wanted to make the P90 more viable. With these changes to recoil, it'll offer a better choice between the two. The MP5 will still be better at landing headshots as the recoil is easier to control, but now the P90 should be able to dish out lethal damage more quickly if you aim for the body. The recoil changes are done in 5 ways. The gun will rise at a slower rate, minus 20% on keyboard and mouse and minus 12.5% on gamepad. It will reach its maximum recoil slower than before at negative 35% on both input devices. The first shot multiplier has been lowered significantly, minus 25% on keyboard and mouse, minus 33% on gamepad. The maximum recoil value is higher. This means that if you fire automatically for a long time, once you reach the maximum recoil, it will be bigger than before. That's a 16% increase on keyboard and mouse and a 12% on gamepad. Finally, the diamond shape was modified so it should pull less drastically to the left. The diamond shape is, of course, the built-in recoil profile that is different for each gun in the way it shoots as you kind of go through your automatic burst patterns. Then we have a change I've been waiting a while for. I play a lot of Mute, and seeing his MP5K get an increase of damage is something I've really been waiting for. Before the patch, he did 27 damage from 0 to 16 meters. Now, after the patch, he's going to do 31 damage from 0 to 16 meters. It's not a major change, but anything is nice. The recoil has also been improved in a couple of ways. The diamond, or the general recoil shape, has been modified so it should have a less horizontal recoil variation on full automatic fire, and this should help you to land headshots easier. They're also slightly lowering the maximum recoil limit. In other words, the recoil will not be as important upon reaching its maximum. It'll be down 10% across the board. The next weapon to get a change is Blackbeard's MK17 CQB, the Scar. They felt that the recoil while having the gun shield on was a little too easy to control, and they wanted to make it a little tougher to control when holding down full automatic fire. The change to the recoil is done in two ways and only affects it when the gun shield is on. When the gun shield isn't on, this doesn't apply. First, it's used to reduce the first shot multiplier. It will now make it slightly more important with a plus 10% impact across all the input devices. The speed at which the gun attained its maximum recoil was higher by 50% when bearing the gun shield. It's now set at 100%. It will reach its maximum recoil twice as fast compared to when the gun shield is not equipped. The last change comes to Frost's 9mm C1 submachine gun. They wanted the player to have more of a decision, and it was just obvious that everybody was taking the shotgun when it came to her. While some people would take the SMG, they wanted it to be a more viable approach overall for everyone in general. It's getting an increase to damage for close and long-range encounters. Before the patch, it did 40 damage from 0 to 16 meters, and beyond that, 24. Now it's going to do 45 damage from 0 to 16 meters, and beyond that, 27. Many of these are not significant night and day increases. While some of them can be pretty important, most of them are minor tweaks to either damage or recoil or things like that. This should create a little bit more balance overall in the game just based on how they've seen weapon picks play out and the feedback from the community in general. They also address some other issues. First up is team killing. They're trying to find a balance between accidental team kills and intentional ones. They're putting in place the following changes to try to help deal with this. First up is that they've reduced the limit of team kills allowed in a match before getting auto-kicked from a match. Also, for those that spam kill the hostage, killing the hostage is now considered to be multiple team kills. They've also reduced the limit of team kills allowed in the early phase of the match before getting auto-kicked from a match. Also, early team kills add up throughout the whole match and will not reset in between rounds. In a future update, they're going to be implementing an anti-bullying system. This will make it so that if a player team kills the same person multiple times, then they will be removed from the match. They're also addressing hit registration, and they say that they're aware that many players have been experiencing hit reg issues since Season 3 started. They want to acknowledge that it's a challenging issue to deal with, and they're trying to work on it. It's definitely a priority for them. They did identify an issue related to high ping, which has been fixed for 4.2. Players will sometimes connect to the wrong data center, which will result in high ping. This issue often results in a bad gaming experience and may sometimes be related to hit registration issues. They do say they have a dedicated team assigned to work on this issue, and it is, once again, a priority. Aside from that, there's various bug fixes, and due to the length of this video, I'm not really going to get into all of them now. Suffice to say, if you want to check them all out, head on over to rainbow6.ub.com for the full list. You can also find a copy of that on the forum, the subreddit, and links to it on Rainbow Six's Twitter and Facebook pages. Once again, all of these changes are starting tomorrow, Tuesday, September 13th. This is on all platforms simultaneously. The times for these vary a little bit, but they usually start implementing the changes somewhere between 9 and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, I don't have confirmation for sure that these will be the update times when they will go live, but just looking back at the way the previous patches have trended, that's when they typically get changed. So if anybody's wondering if it'll go live at midnight tonight, no, that's not the case. The game's been out for 10 months now, and we've been used to our mid-month patches the whole time. However, this represents a first. Never before have we gotten so many changes just by sheer volume and impact all in one package. I mean, we're getting 3 operator either buffs or nerfs. We're getting weapon rebalancing, new attachment categories, new gadget categories, just modifications to existing loadouts. All kinds of stuff going on here, and this is kind of unprecedented. This is the level of meta change that we typically see coming with a new season, but this is a mid-season upgrade. In fact, the way they reference mid-season reinforcements makes it sound like this might be a type of approach they might try just kind of going forward. Bridging that gap at the 90-day mark instead of waiting the full 3 months kind of helps the game continue to feel fresh in between, so it's not stagnating halfway through that 3-month period. And while we're not seeing necessarily new content in the way of like maps and operators, just the changes in balance that this brings about will be enough to keep the game fresh until we get the Season 4 content update. So I'll be excited to see them continue to do that going forward. Now, if you want to stay up to date on all the latest news, tips, tricks, reviews, walkthroughs, and more for Rainbow Six Siege, please consider liking and subscribing. Additionally, you can also follow me over at IcyCat25 on either Facebook or Twitter. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.